Hello everyone, it is Randy here. Welcome back to my channel and thank you very much for joining me today. Okay, so today we are going to go back in time. That's right. We are going to do a thought experiment, and it's going to involve one of my favorite topics, which is time travel. So don't forget to like and subscribe if you like this content. I'm gonna beg you for likes and subscribes as a sacrifice and offering to the YouTube algorithm. All right. This video is sponsored by no one. It's not sponsored at all. This is just my video. Okay. So, without further ado, here is a thought experiment, and please do this thought experiment on your own when you have time, or do it right now. Pause the video, do this thought experiment with me. You wake up, and you've gone back in time 15 years. Now, you can't take anything with you. You can't take your technology, your smartphone, any artifacts from the future. You've gone back in time into your body from 15 years ago. Now, what you're taking with you is your memory, everything that you recall, and your skills. So you basically wake up in your body from 15 years ago, but with your memory, with everything that you know of the world and that happens to the world and everything that happens to you and people around you. So you have all of this knowledge and you have all of this information, you have all of these skills in your head. You wake up in your own body, and in this thought experiment, unless you decide to actively intervene in some way, everything will play out in the same way. So assuming you make exactly the same choices and you know you're physically where you were or are for the next 15 years, or you're in the same physical places and the exact same things happen to you and you act in the same way. If that were to happen, the world will look exactly the same and everything happens in the same way, right? So this is not sort of like a multiverse thought experiment where now you're in a different dimension with everything will just be the same. Now, obviously, you can make certain choices to change your future or perhaps the future of the world. But if you choose not to change anything, that's okay too. The world will just go on, and 15 years later, you will just be where you are. Okay, does that make sense? So that's the thought experiment. So I've actually had this particular thought experiment conducted on a number of friends of mine. And I'll give you sort of the general consensus, and this may be a reflection really of the present rather than of the past. But the majority of my friends say that they won't change anything, or they'll change very few things, which I think is great, because honestly, a lot of the thought experiments are a reflection of where you are in life right now. Like, are you happy with your life, right? So they won't change much. Now pausing for a second, let me just ask you the question, because this video is not about my friends, it's about you. So what will you change? Would you change anything? Right? So you now have sort of foresight into 15 years into the future. So you get to live those 15 years again. What would you change, if any? Right? Would you make different decisions in life? Would you behave differently? These are questions for you to reflect. If, for example, you had no choice and you suddenly woke up in your body from 15 years ago, suppose this was something imposed upon you, right? And you're forced to relive 15 years. Well, think about that for a second. I think it's a very important question, because it's a reflection of where you are in life and where perhaps you want it to be. Like, are you happy with where you are? Did life turn out the way that you wanted it to turn out? And if you could change things, if you could do things differently, what would that look like? So pause and reflect on that, because it's really important for you to interact with this idea, and not just absorb this idea, but really really struggle with it, really interact, really think deeply about it. Okay, so if all you watch is the first 5 minutes of this video and you don't want to watch the rest, just think about that thought experiment, and think about it, reflect on it. Okay, so again, going back to what my friends said, and then I'm going to tell you what I would do. So the general consensus among my friends is that they wouldn't change much. I had one friend who said that on a particular date he got into a car accident. So knowing that he would get into this car accident, he wouldn't be there that day, right? But everything else, he's satisfied with where he is in life, and he's generally quite happy. Some of the other friends I've met, some of whom who've traveled to different countries and now have moved out of Canada. I have a friend who I had this conversation with, and he's moved to Thailand, and he has a wife there, and he's building a beautiful life in Thailand. He told me he wouldn't change much, right? He loves his life. He loves what he's doing. There's maybe some other financial decisions that he would make differently in terms of his career that would put him in a better place career-wise and from a financial perspective. But his life, the trajectory, he said he wouldn't change much. So I take these as very positive signs from these people I've talked to, these friends who are essentially saying, look, my life is good. It's not perfect, but my life is good. So if your answer is I wouldn't change much, that's a good thing. That means you're satisfied with the present, because all of the choices you've made in life have led you to the present, right? You in this particular moment in time, you are the accumulation of all of the choices that you have made. I'm a firm believer in free will and in choice. Yes, things happen to you, but a lot of what happens to you and how you interpret what happens to you is also your choice. And of course, you have active choice to control your destiny to a large extent, right? If you don't like where you are, move to a different place. If you don't like the people you're around, don't hang out with them, right? If you're not happy with your health, improve your health. If you're not happy with your financial situation, do something about it, right? There's no point staying at home and crying about it. You have full autonomy to change your life and to do things differently. So that's some context and a little bit of anecdotal survey information, if you will, from my friends and colleagues. But this video, of course, is not just about you. It's also about me. So I'm going to tell you what I would do if I went back 15 years. So again, I've reflected on this quite deeply. I think the first thing I need to recognize is that there are certain people I need to spend more time with, and I need to really cherish those relationships. I would immediately spend a lot more time and really appreciate the time with certain people in my life from 15 years ago, and really savor those relationships, because those relationships are precious. The thing is, not everyone in my life 15 years ago, they're in my life now, right? For different reasons. Some people have moved away. I don't see them anymore. Some relationships have voluntarily or involuntarily ended. Some people have died, right? I have family members who have died, right? 15 years ago they were alive, and now they've passed away. For example, my grandparents, right? They're not here anymore, and members of my extended family. So certainly I would spend more time with them. I've had friends who've passed away, right? Really tragic. Friends in their 30s or late 20s who have passed away. I certainly would spend more time with them and cherish those relationships. I don't think I can control death, right? This is not a scenario where you can control what happens to a lot of these people in their life. If it's meant to be, it's in a sense meant to be. If they're eventually, I think, the same fate would happen to these people. So I'm not here to try to advocate changing people's fate and their destiny. No, the destiny of other people, maybe yours, but not of other people. I think whatever is going to happen to them is just going to happen to them. But it's important to cherish those relationships, to spend more time, to savor those experiences, those shared experiences, because as we grow up and as the inevitable march of time, or as we inevitably march with time. Do we march with time, or does time just march on its own? I don't know. What's the right way of expressing this? The inevitable march of time. Let's call it the inevitable march of time. Let's personify time here. And yeah, really, take a look at the relationships of people around you and really cherish that, because in 15 years from now, from where you are today, a lot of those people are not going to be here, right? For the same reasons, not for various reasons, for the same reasons, relationships end, people move away, people fall in and out of your life, and people die. So you really should, or I encourage you shouldn't do anything you don't want to do, but I encourage you to really reflect on that and to cherish those relationships and to spend a bit more time and do a little bit more for those people around you, especially those people who you really care about. Because sometimes it's not even your fault or anyone's fault that relationships end. Sometimes, whether it's friendships, romantic relationships, family relationships as well, sometimes they just end, or they wither or erode. Sometimes it's for the best, and sometimes it's not for the best, and life happens. I'm sure you understand from your own life experience that if you look at the people you're hanging out with today, they're not the same people. Most likely they're not the same people that you're hanging out with from 15 years ago. That there may be some of the same people, but a lot of the people are certainly not the same. So value those relationships, value those connections. I think it's really, really important. Okay, so that's on relationships. Number 2. Now, if I could go back in time 15 years, I think I would choose my investments very differently, right? I would put a lot of money into Bitcoin. Now, this is sort of an obvious thing, that if you could foresee the future in terms of knowing when the market goes up and down and what happens to the market, and global events like the pandemic and the war in Ukraine and all of these global events that will happen over the course of 15 years, right? So if I were to do this video, okay, it's 2024, right? So if I go back in time 15 years, it's around 2009, right after the financial crisis, right? So I will know, for example, that Trump will be elected twice. I'll know about the sovereign debt crisis in Europe, austerity in Greece. Know about the Syrian civil war and the Arab Spring, the advent of artificial intelligence, cryptocurrency and the explosion of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. Obviously, the big one is the global pandemic. So I will know all of this. So I think the first thing I will do, if I woke up in my body from 15 years ago, I would spend maybe 2 or 3 days just writing everything down, right? This is what happens in the future. I would take a large piece of paper or multiple large pieces of paper, and I will document exactly what I remember the future will look like. Remember, in the thought experiment, the future, if you don't change anything, doesn't change, right? And it may not change anyways. It just, this is, again, not a multiverse scenario where it just, everything happens in the same way. So you can actually have some good understanding of when things happen. Now, I doubt you will have a lot of control over a lot of these things, and I will get into that later on in this video about your level of control over yourself and your level of control over large global events. But at least the first thing I would do is write everything down. Spend 2 or 3 days writing everything down, exactly when things happen, when global events happen, and especially when market events happen, and investments that are good. For example, I would certainly, I think, get into a lot more debt. I don't have any debt right now. And I've been very good throughout my entire life not to have significant amounts of debt. And I've never had long periods of time where I've had debt. I've had a mortgage at one point and student debt from university, but all of that's been paid off. But I think I would get into a lot more debt, right? If I could replay, because 15 years ago, interest rates were really low, right? We had a historic, right after the financial crisis, we had a historic period of low interest rates. I think I would have leveraged that for sure, bought a number of properties, especially in my home city of Toronto, where prices then went through the roof. So, knowing that, right, like you have the foresight of 15 years, I certainly would have bought a lot more properties, and I think I would have then sold them, because at a certain point the property market didn't do as well. But knowing this, right, knowing that this is what's going to happen, you'll perhaps have a 10-year time frame of leveraging a lot of debt and then buying these properties, selling these properties, flipping these properties. Certainly Bitcoin, right? From a financial perspective, Bitcoin, certain cryptocurrencies, absolutely great investment, right? If you got in 2009, right, 15 years ago, and you put a significant amount of money into Bitcoin, and then you borrowed money, right? Interest rates were low, so if you borrowed that money, you put it into Bitcoin, and you know what's going to happen to certain exchanges. You know that Mt. Gox, MTGOX, previously called the Magic the Gathering online exchange, which was then translated to Mt. Gox, was that exchange that collapsed. You wouldn't put it there, right? You take it into some private wallet somewhere. You wouldn't leave it on the exchange. You know that eventually that certain exchanges, in Canada there's one called Quadralix, which turned out to be a scam, right? People who left their money in that exchange, they lost everything. So at least you would avoid these scams, and ideally you would keep your Bitcoin and your crypto safe. So you'd have that. You certainly would know some of the up-and-coming stocks to buy, right? So put your money into Google, which becomes Alphabet, right? That explodes. Nvidia, right? Put your money into Nvidia. Tesla, I'm not even sure if Tesla existed at the time, but Tesla explodes at a certain point. You can certainly pick and choose your stocks. And with a 10 to 15 year head start, it's pretty sweet. You know that you eventually will make a load of money that way. So at least financially, I think you would be very comfortable if you just remember what happens to the stock market, which stocks went up and which stocks went down, what happened to the crypto market. If you just position yourself financially, you would do very well, right? I would have I would be several times richer than I am now. I'm very comfortable with my life, but if I could go back, I would be several times richer. And you would be too, if you had this ability to place the bets where the results. It's like rigging the casino in a way, right? Now, what else would I change, right? So I've had this conversation where, if I could go back in time, I would probably start my law firm a bit earlier. Like if this were 2009, I would already have all of the knowledge of the next 15 years, right? So why work on Bay Street for 5 years first? I would just immediately start my law firm. I would know exactly which marketing tactics to use, which people to hire, how to build the firm. I would be miles ahead, right? My business would be highly successful because I would be able to leverage 15 years of experience and do it 15 years ago. When the competition was different, when the environment was different, I could be a pioneer in many different areas of advertising, in marketing, in business development. I think my business would certainly do a lot better. That's not the right word because my business is doing really well. Not a lot better, but my business would certainly go on a rocket type trajectory in that it would grow a lot faster because I have 15 years of experience. It almost feels like cheating, where you can leverage all of that local knowledge and sort of knowledge from the future to make the right hiring choices, to make the right marketing choices, to really develop your market as a business owner. I would certainly do that. But then there's some interesting thoughts I had here, which is, if I did something different, right? If I didn't start a business or continued my career as a lawyer, would that be better or worse, or just different, right? So suppose I went again back in time. I have 15 years to relive. Like, would I do it all over again? Like, would I actually? Because certainly the advantage of doing it all over again is you can do it more efficiently, right? Like what I said, you can invest in the right things, you can run your business more efficiently. The efficiency is there because you can leverage that knowledge. But what if you wanted to do something completely different? What if you wanted to go to Thailand and become an artist, right? Or just bum around on a beach in Cambodia, or become a contortionist. I'm just making this up, right? Or just relive the 15 years, but do something completely different, which is also a really tempting alternative, right? So you sort of have these two very interesting but competing narratives of your life. One is bigger, better, more efficient, right? Do exactly what you did, or something similar to what you did, but just do a much better job of it, right? Bigger, better. Make more, eat more, do more, right? You're whatever in your career. Perhaps you would be promoted sooner if you followed certain paths or didn't make certain mistakes. Whatever it is, right? The bigger, better, more efficient version of yourself, because now you can capitalize on all that knowledge. Or do you choose to relive the 15 years but do something completely different? So you abandon that path that you otherwise would have taken in this particular timeline, in your actual reality. You abandon that, and instead you move to Europe and become a chocolatier, right? You move to South America and you fix motorcycles. You travel the world as a yoga instructor. You become a monk and live in a monastery in Rome, right? Like these type of interesting, different life choices that you could make. Would you consider that? Now just pause and think about that. Would you redo your life in a more efficient way and just avoid mistakes, and just invest correctly and just make more money? That type of redo? Or would you redo it very differently, right? Just having a completely different adventure. Because you've already done this, right? For 15 years, you already know what this looks like. This particular life, right? For me, that would be the corporate life, right? I did 15 years of corporate law firm, Bay Street, office towers, late night work, working on lawsuits, that type of thing. Do I want to do that again? It's a rhetorical question and a really interesting question. Do I want to work those late nights again? I'll certainly be more efficient at it, and I can probably accomplish a lot more, but do I want to work those late nights? Do I want to do that all over again, even if the result is bigger, better, faster, stronger, right? Or do I want to skip the country, go off to Australia and hang out with kangaroos and work at a koala farm or something? Just being ridiculous with these absurd examples, but just something completely out of left field. Be a poet, or do stand-up comedy, or I don't know, move to Germany and do improv. Just something completely left field, out of left field, sort of changing of your life script. That's something interesting to think about. Are there unmet desires, unmet goals that you really wanted to pursue and you didn't in this particular timeline, in your timeline? For me, I think I'm pretty satisfied. I think I wouldn't mind doing my life again. Replay the last 15 years, but in a more efficient way. I don't think I would mind that. Certainly I would make some modifications. But maybe for you want to do something completely different, right? if you had a family, or if you have a family right now, maybe you don't want to have a family, right? Maybe you want to be single for 15 years. Or if you are single right now, or maybe you would want to start a family, meet someone and pop out some children. Who knows? I mean, there's a lot of that going on too, right? Which is like who you're with, which relationships you're in. Do you want family? Do you not want family? Where you live, the location of your residence, the country you're in, the things that you're doing, right? These are the big ones, right? Your relationships, who you're with, romantic or otherwise, where you live, right? Which country and which city you're living in, what you're doing, right? Your career and your activities. Right, so you could change all three, right? So if you're working on a corporate job in New York, and you're married and you have 2 children, maybe you want to be in Colombia, working as a juggler, and you're single and you're meeting new people every day and living this very freestyle life. Maybe that's what you want. Who knows? I don't know. That's up to you to decide, but it's something interesting to think about. But I can tell you that if you choose the other path, you can't really then leverage a lot of the skills you've built, and that's the problem. So, I had this conversation again with one of my friends, and he said, well, why don't you? Because I ran for politics once, right? So when I was 29, I ran for city council in Toronto. I lost, but he said, well, would you do that again? Would you, now that you know what happens, with your experience of 15 years, would you run again in politics? And maybe by 40 you'll be prime minister. Well, maybe not, because I don't have any. Just because I can see 15 years into the future, it's not that I've gained any real political skills. Right? Because all my skills mostly were in starting a business, running a business, and in law. So I didn't build a lot of political connections or political skills. So if I had to redo it again, would I necessarily be successful? Just because I have 15 years of knowledge of the future. Because I can't necessarily leverage a lot of that if I'm changing a life path. Does that make sense? Right? Because I'll give you an even more extreme example. If I decide to be an artist or something, I have 15 years of knowledge, but it doesn't mean I have 15 years of art experience. I have 15 years of legal experience. So I can't leverage any of that. I can redo it, but would I necessarily be successful as an artist or a politician? I don't know. Maybe not. Right? Because I can't leverage my actual experience. So the advantage of being able to relive your life again and do more or less the same thing is you can leverage the experience and the mistakes you've made. Whereas if you choose a different path, you can't leverage much because you're choosing a different path and you're going to have to replay that path. Now, the exciting thing is you get to do something different. So it's novel and it's exciting. But you can't leverage your experience in that way. So even if I went back in time 15 years, I think I would just be a so-so politician, right? I don't think I would be an all-star politician just because I could go back in time, because I don't think the connections and the skills are there. And this leads me to another point, which is that I think there are certain things that you're inclined to do and a certain way that you are inclined to behave regardless. This is sort of a destiny argument that I would bring forth, that you, in a way, you can't avoid your fate, right? Because there are certain desires that you have, and certain things that I think you're ultimately going to want to do, regardless of whether you relive your life from 15. You get to relive the last 15 years. I think you're still going to make certain decisions that are going to be inevitable, right? You're going to still have certain interests and certain desires and some certain traumas, perhaps, and deep-seated desires and tendencies that will push you in one direction. For example, if you, what's a good example of sort of a deep-seated desire? If you have this tendency to want to, show off or be really interested in status, and that's something that's really important to you because of some deep-seated psychological desire, if you were to replay your life, I think you would still do that, right? I don't think replaying your life is necessarily going to solve your traumas or you're going to be a completely different person. I don't think you're going to be a completely different person whatsoever. You're going to be the same person. And if you don't address underlying insecurities or tendencies that may not be the best for you, it's still going to happen again. I mean, that was just one example, but suppose you have a tendency towards addiction, right? Whether it's alcohol, cigarettes, gambling, sex, drugs. If you have addictive tendencies, if you were to redo your life, I would imagine for most people, you would still have those tendencies. Now, you may choose to work on those tendencies. Maybe you want to see a therapist. Maybe you would work on yourself differently if you chose to do so. But I think at the onset, those tendencies would still be there, right? You're still you. Just because you went back in time doesn't mean you're not you. You're not a completely different person. Your tendencies, your addictions, your compulsions, your neuroses. If you're an anxious person, if you go back 15 years, you're still going to be an anxious person, all right? Because your anxiety probably developed way earlier on in your life, probably when you were a little kid, right? These early childhood experiences really influence our mental health. I don't think you would suddenly not be anxious or depressed, or have tendencies towards depression or anxiety. If you have those tendencies now, you go back in time, I think you would still have those tendencies. If you have particular inclinations, particular desires, particularly deep-seated desires for yourself and how you want to interact with the world, I don't see that changing. So there's going to be some element of destiny. Like if you're inherently a lazy person and you're lazy now, you go back 15 years, I don't think that's going to be different. You're still going to be lazy, right? Because it's just the way that you interact with the world. That's not going to change. So sadly, my conclusion is that for most people, even if they got the extra 15 years, not much is going to change for them. Now, for some people, they may become superstars, and they may actually take that knowledge and make their lives better or try to change the world. But I think for a lot of people, if, again, this was imposed on you, and if you just were thrown back into time, for a lot of people, I get a sense that not much will change, and their tendencies will still take hold, and their behavior will still be relatively the same, and they're going to end up in somewhat of a similar place in life. That going forward, your behaviors and your tendencies and the way that you think really dictate where you end up. They just end up replaying everything again. Maybe in a better way, because I certainly with hindsight, they say hindsight is 50-50. So there is some level of repurposing of your life. But again, I fear for a lot of people, it's going to be a little bit repetitive. They're going to make the same mistakes, and they're going to end up more or less in the same place. That's just my sense. I mean, you let me know what you think. Would most people just immediately better their lives? But I mean this from a psychological perspective, right? Because like you are you have a particular way of doing things, right? There's a reason you are where you are in your life right now. If you went back, like, are you necessarily going to change, right? If you can't do it now, like if you go back in time, are you going to do it differently? Like really? Like you may try. It's like a New Year's resolution, right? You may try to do it differently for a while, but then you may get accustomed to certain things, and you may get comfortable. So food for thought there. There is a human tendency towards mediocrity. For the general population, there is, right? There's a tendency to sort of be mediocre, to not strive for more, to be just kind of satisfied. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but there is a tendency for people to try to be mediocre, and just kind of adjust to this fuzzy level of mediocrity, being stable and comfortable. Right, in everything, in relationships, in love, and in life, in finance, and ambition. Most people in the world just kind of gravitate towards this level of mediocrity. And I would assume that a lot of people are satisfied with being mediocre, but that's just where most of the world end up, right? If you think of the bell curve, the middle population, right, this average, well, that is the average, the mediocre average. That's where most people end up. So You know, that's where most people end up. What can I say? Okay, now for the ambitious people, right? For people at the extreme ends of the bell curve, if they want to change the world, suppose you go back 15 years, can you actually change the world, right? Yes, you have 15 years of knowledge, and skills and foresight. Can you stop the pandemic from happening? Like actually, if you went back 15 years, you're going to be at that wet market in Wuhan or that lab, and you're going to be there to stop it. Are you going to do that? Can you do that? Can you stop Putin from starting the war in Ukraine? You have 15 years as a head start. Can you stop Putin from invading Ukraine? Can you stop, if you wanted to, Trump from being elected twice? Or Biden from being elected, right? It doesn't matter. It could be anybody. Could you stop that? Or change that? Can you change any of this, right? Beyond putting money in Bitcoin and maybe changing a couple of things in your own life, can you change big global events? Even if you had this head start, you have the knowledge of it, you know it's going to happen, but can you change it? And this is where things get really interesting, which is I don't know if you can. I don't know if you, the individual, unless you want to dedicate the next 15 years on maybe changing one thing, right? And if that was really, really important to you. Like, for example, the pandemic, can you prevent the pandemic from happening? Or would it be better for you just to stock up on masks and get yourself really healthy and build a really comfortable life for yourself so that you're ready for it? I think that's a more reasonable expectation. But can you save the world from the pandemic? Do you want to save the world from the pandemic? Can you stop global warming, climate change? You have a 15-year head start. You know it's going to happen. You know that we're all fucked. But can you stop it from happening? Or change it in some way, or mitigate it in some way? Can you actually? Maybe. Again, if you perhaps put your entire energy into some small aspect of it, you can move the needle a little bit. But one person with 15 years of foresight is, I don't think, enough to change the trajectory of global events. And again, remember, in this thought experiment, everything will happen the same way, right? Everything will just, the momentum is the same. It's not like the randomness will change anything in this thought experiment. It just, everything will just happen in the same way. So, I mean, your intervention may be really minimal. I think the most significant intervention is really in your own life, right? You can make your own life a little bit more comfortable. Maybe those around you make some different life choices. But the big choices, right? You know, in science fiction, there's this, I'm sure you're aware of this, the butterfly effect, right? This was originally a theory proposed, I think, many years ago, that the fluttering of a butterfly somewhere in the world can cause a hurricane many miles away by virtue of chaos theory and the butterfly effect, that the small changes and variations could have big ripple effects elsewhere. It's a great scientific theory. You see this in a lot of movies where, you go back in time, you change one small thing, and the entire world is different. In reality, I suspect the opposite to be true, which is that most of the things you do will have absolutely no effect on the wider world. They have effect on you, sure, you can make your life better and maybe those around you. But on the wider world, you got a little bit richer. Congratulations, right? You ate healthier. Maybe you stayed in that relationship you should have ended, or maybe you ended that relationship you shouldn't have stayed in. Congratulations, you're a happier person. Maybe you have a more meaningful life, but you can't change, well, I would assume that there's not much you can do to change the world, from stopping these huge seismic global events from happening anyways, which is sort of the opposite of the butterfly effect, if you think, right? This is like, we're kind of powerless. And I was reflecting on just how powerless we actually are. If I were to impose this scenario on myself, like, could I stop any of this? I mean, I can warn people that we're heading towards a pandemic, but would I be a Cassandra? I mean, Cassandra, as in the Greek hero who had the gift of foresight, but nobody would believe her because she was also cursed, right? I'm sure you have heard of this story from ancient Greek mythology. So would I be a Cassandra? Right? I could say the pandemic is happening in 2020. There's going to be this huge pandemic, and we're all going to be indoors. There's going to be lockdowns. Would anybody listen to me? I could be a doom and gloom kind of guy, and spread the word, the gospel of the pandemic. But would anybody actually listen to me if I did it that way? I could try to increase pandemic readiness in the healthcare system. I could be an advocate for 15 years of having more hand sanitizers and masks, right? But it would be it would make a marginal difference. Maybe I can save a couple lives. It would be marginal. Am I gonna go to Wuhan that day and educate myself and try to prevent the spread of COVID-19? Like, am I going to be one of those kind of superhero guys? Like, I don't know. Like, am I capable of doing that? To try to, I don't even know how it started, right? Nobody really knows how it started, so I don't even know where to go. Could I stop that? Could I change the outcome of world elections? Right, of certain people being elected? Am I going to run against certain people? Right, if I don't want Trudeau to be elected, I can run against Trudeau. Am I gonna win? Seek leadership of the Liberal Party? As a 33-year-old? No, I would have. I don't know. I'm going back 15 years, so I would be 25, right? Maybe I win some election somewhere. Because he won in 2015. Like, would I be in a place to challenge him in a leadership race in 2015? I would have been around 33. Really? Like, is that realistic? And this thing with the wars, right? Can I stop the civil war in Syria, the Arab Spring, Putin's invasion of Ukraine? What? Am I gonna go to Russia, talk to Putin? Please don't go. Please don't do it. It causes a lot of chaos. A lot of people are gonna die. You shouldn't do it. Take 15 years to learn Russian and become an oligarch. Like, you know what I mean, right? Like, there's so much that you can't do. You're, in a way, really, really powerless in terms of the world. Now, you are very powerful in terms of yourself because you can take accountability over your own life. But in terms of large global events, in terms of the inevitability of the march of these trends, these macro trends, you are, in a way, very powerless. You can fend for yourself, but can you actually change the world in that way? I'm very doubtful that you can. I'm certainly doubtful that I can. I don't think I can. I think I can change maybe certain minor things, and I can certainly look after myself in a better way and those around me. But to change the world in some meaningful way, just with a 15-year head start, I think I would need a lot more than a 15-year head start, right? So, in that sense, we are ultimately quite powerless. But concluding thoughts, certainly that's not the place where I want to end the video. Concluding thoughts that, when you build your life as well, you can build a good life, however, and whatever path you choose, right? Again, going back to this idea of maybe choosing a different path in your life. At the end of the day, I think you can build the ideal version of that, right? Everyone's trying to some extent, build the ideal version of their lives. And you don't need to go back in time to do that. The whole exercise, this whole thought experiment, if you haven't realized it by now, is not actually about going back in time, right? Like, this is not actually about time travel. This is about you in the present. This is about the next 15 years, right? If you understand what I'm trying to do here is trying to challenge you to say, like, well, it's not because you can't go back in time, right? It's about what do you want to do for the next 15? Because you can only go forward in time. What this thought experiment is for you to reflect how your choices could have been different and what you want to do now. That's the most important piece, which is, what do you want to do now with your life? Because you can also imagine a world where the version of you from 15 years later comes back to you now and has a conversation and says, well, if you did this differently, things would change, right? Because you only have the present. You can't go back in time. You have you in the present. You have what you have now. So how are you going to live the best possible life for yourself? So the whole thought experiment is for you to reflect on that and for you to think about multiple pathways and sort of your power and lack of power within the world. So that being said, I think there are multiple ideals, right? If you continued on your current path, I think you can find the ideal outcome for yourself on that path. If you change your path completely in terms of relationship, career, place of residence, you could also find at some point in time, as long as you kept going, some ideal endpoint, if such a point even exists, or some ideal pathway. I'm inspired by a poem by William Blake, and it's the same poem where the term chariot of fire comes into play. But the last stanza of the poem is, I will not stop my mental fight, nor shall my sword... Does he say that? No, damn it. I'm quoting it wrong. I shall not... I had some drama here and I lost it. I shall not stop my mental fight, nor shall my sword sleep in my hand, until we've built Jerusalem in England's green and pleasant land. And those are the last two lines I really want to stress. Until we've built Jerusalem in England's green and pleasant land. And I've always been quite inspired by these last two lines, not for the religious connotations, but you can build Jerusalem anywhere, right? And Jerusalem here, I'm stripping it of any religious connotations. I mean just sort of your ideal of whatever it is. That's what it means for me. Your Jerusalem, your ideal, right? You can build it in England, you can build it in France, you can build it in your life, in your path, right? I'm really stretching this analogy a bit, but it means something personal to me. Building Jerusalem in England's green and pleasant land means that you can build, for me, this my personal interpretation is that you can build your ideal wherever you want, right? Because Jerusalem is not in England. Jerusalem is well in Israel. But you can build that idea somewhere where it normally wouldn't belong, right? Because you think England and Jerusalem, they're very far away and different cultures. But you get what I'm saying. You can build your Jerusalem in Spain with a Spanish family working as a yoga instructor if you wanted to. That could be your Jerusalem. You could build it in the corporate world in New York, having no family, but you have the big office tower, corner office, and you're making millions of dollars. You can build it in India, working for an NGO and saving children. You can build it in a yacht if you're going around the world and living in luxury and looking up at the stars. You can build Jerusalem anywhere you want, as long as you keep, or as long as you attempt and make those attempts to build Jerusalem. Your personal Jerusalem, in your green and pleasant land, wherever that is for you. So that's where this poem really resonates. Is building your ideal in a place of your choosing. And I think whatever path you go, you can build your ideal if you choose to build your ideal. And life is difficult. There are many challenges, and some paths seem dark and depressing. But there is an ideal in that path as well, that you can uncover and you can build. Now, one last thought before I let you go, which is, if the version of me now went back in time 15 years ago, I would tell myself, enjoy the process, enjoy the journey more, right? I would absolutely tell myself that. Enjoy the process, enjoy the journey. And honestly, the version of me from 15 years in the future, if it came back to me now, if my 55-year-old were to sit down with my 40-year-old, my current present 40-year-old, he would say the same thing. The 55-year-old version of me would say to the 40-year-old version of me, you should enjoy life. Just enjoy the process, enjoy the moment. It's the same advice I would give as a 40-year-old to my 25-year-old self. It would be the same advice, which is really interesting. It's the same advice, and it must be the right one, which is enjoy the process, enjoy the journey, because wherever you end up, you have to enjoy the journey. Just absolutely live life, enjoy the process. Don't be too obsessed with the outcome. The process is actually more important. Remember that. It's about the journey, not the destination. The destination is really important, but don't forget the destination. But the journey, that's where the human experience is expressed. It's not the outcome, right? The human experience is in the journey. This is Randy I. Do not forget to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'm trying to grow my channel, so if you could help me, that would be great. If you watch this video to the end, you are my hero. I love you, and you deserve a gold medal in the Randy YouTube Olympics. Gold medal for you. I hope you're having a wonderful day. I hope this video has made your day a little bit better. I hope to see you in the next video. And don't forget to smile. Talk to you soon. Ah.